So let's look at this again, and we're going to say, all right, if I went one step forwards, then what would be the negative step would be a negative 11 steps would be backwards, would be 12 minus 11. So I can either get, if I'm going around the block, I can get to the same spot going one step forward or go 11 steps the other way. Now notice this is similar to the concept we used before, which was the inverse distance. The inverse distance, a lot of times people think about it as though they're similar concepts in nature, the way we have to use them. But the inverse, typically, if I'm thinking of going from here to here, I'm thinking the inverse is going from here to here, meaning I'm measuring from this point or I'm measuring from this point. But also, you kind of have to use that inverse concept if you're going from here backwards up to like this C, because I have to count the distance, 5, 6, 7, and then kind of take the inverse. You might think about that more like the mirror inverse or something like that. So these are going to be kind of related terms. Again, they get messy because we don't have a real ability to deal with directionality. So, all right. So we're going to say, what would that be then? Now, if we think about this 0 as the 0 point, that would be the perfect first. Normally, I go forward, one step forward to get a one note away minor second. But I could start from here and one step backwards, or in essence, counterclockwise. If I went backwards, what am I going to call that? Well, I can call it a -1 because that's going to be the notes that I'm going to say is backwards. But then I'm going to keep the naming convention. Instead of calling it a negative second scale degree. Again, some people use that term, but I would think the better term to call it would be the directionality term, as though you were going forward. How do you get that? You have to say, okay, well, -1 minus 12 would be 11. So if I was going forward around the block, it would be 11 steps, which would be a major 7. So that means I would call it a -1 note away major 7. And the inverse of that would then be an 11 note away major 7. So the bottom line is I'm thinking that the major 7 could be either 11 steps going forward or one step going backwards, right? So if I'm on this C, if I'm on like this C, I could go backwards. Let's grab this bit. I could go backwards 1, or I could go forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I would name it 11 note away major 7 or a -1 major 7. And that'll allow you the distance. Now, of course, later we'll talk about the better term, which would be using this term, which would be a -1 note away from the Ionian node, which would be a -1 modal half step, which you would think would be the -2nd scale degree. But notice we don't have a -2nd scale degree. You could use them, but nobody really does that I've seen, right? So you have to call it a major 7. This would make more sense because then you can see the inverse easily, because 12 minus 1 would be 11, an 11 note away, and then 7 minus 1 would be a 6 modal half step forward, an 11 note away from the Ionian node, 6 modal half step forward. So you can see this one makes sense. You can't do it over here because the scale degrees mess you up, so you completely lose the scale degrees when you go upwards. All right, so let's go to the next one. If I went 2 forward, that would be like 10 back. So what if I went 2 back? I should be opening up the bottom bit here, right? So what if I start on this 0 and I go 2 negative or counterclockwise? That would be kind of like the mirror distance of 11 or 12, right? So in other words, if I went 2 backwards, let's do it down here. Where is that going to put me? That would be like going 12 minus 2, which would be 10 forward, and I have to know that 10 forward would be a minor 7. Now the minor 7 is going to land me in the ocean if I went from the Aeolian mode. So I mean from the Ionian mode. So let's do it from the Aeolian mode and say we're on this Aeolian. So we're going to say, all right, we're here, boom, and we're going to go 2 backwards, which would bring me to here. So I'm going from here back to here. So what am I going to call that? Well, normally it would be going forward. So I have to say, well, then 12 minus 2 would be 10. So normally I would be going forward 10, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to here. So I could say it would be a 10 note away minor 7, which if I go backwards, I would then call it a negative 2 note away minor 7. Now, right, so that's going to be the idea of that, and that's the general idea. So negative 2 note away minor 7. All right, let's do the next one. Let's go up to this one and say we're going to go backwards 3. So we're going backwards 3. So if I go back 3, then what would it be if I went forwards? It would be 12 minus 3, which would be forward 9. So a 9 is something that would be in the Ionian mode. It wouldn't land me in the ocean from the Ionian. So let's go to the Ionian here and say that we go back 3. So let's go 1, 2, 3 would get me to this Aeolian. So I'm going back 3. Now that would be equivalent to going up 9, meaning there's 5 notes between these two. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I could go up to this A, right? So what would I call that? I would call, if I'm going from here back to here, I would call that a negative 3 note away major 6. So I'm using the same major 6 as though we're going forward. The 6 is basically meaningless in terms of going backwards, but I'd rather call it a major 6 rather than a negative 1, like if this was scale degree 1, 2, 3. I could call it a third scale degree, right? But no one really does that. So that's why I would add the directionality of the notes. It's negative 3 notes, but still call it a major 6, which will still give you the flavor as though you're kind of going forward. Now, again, the better way to do that is to use this term. Say it's an IA modal range, which would be a negative 3 Ionian negative second modal half step, which would be a negative third scale degree, but we don't have negative third scale degrees. Why would this make sense? Because obviously if you went the other way, it would be 12 minus 3, which would be 9, and this second number would be 7 minus 2, which would be 5. So you'd have a 9 note away Ionian fifth. So you see how that makes perfect sense, but you can't really do that with the scale degrees because of the scale degrees, so you kind of get messed up going backwards. All right, so let's do the next one. Let's say we go up and say we're going back 4 now. So if I go back 4, I'm going to say, what is that? Well, if I go back 4 notes, it's going to be what if I went forward, it would be 12 minus 4 or 8. If I went 8 forward, I call that a minor 6. That's going to be a distance of a minor 6. So let's look at it here. If I went down here and say, all right, that's going to be having to go from a minor node. So now we're going back 4. So we're going from here, 1, 2, 3, 4 to here. So normally I don't say negative. I'd have to say, what would it be going forward? It would be going forward 8. So 5, 6, 7, 8 also gets me to a Lydian down here. But I'm going backwards. So I would say that the minor 6 then, I want to memorize that going backwards, it would be a negative 4 minor 6. So it's a positive 8 minor 6 or a negative 4 minor 6. When I go backwards, the 6 is basically meaningless because you would think it would be a negative 1, 2, 3, a negative third scale degree, which you could use, but again, I don't think a lot of people do, so I would think the best thing to do is just to memorize that a minor 6 could be a negative 4 distance or a positive 8 distance, and the 6 doesn't help you at all to go negative. That just hangs on there. Now again, I'll get to the Aeolian later, so we'll see that distance, and I'll compare these distances in next time. Let's keep going here, though. I'm going to say, let's go back to this and go up to the next one. So that would be like this one went up 4. So now let's say we go negative 5, perfect fifth. So if I went 5 notes back, so let's say we're on the C and we go 5 notes back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That lands me on a continent. What would I call it? Well, I can't call it a negative 5 usually. I'd have to say the inverse would be 12 minus 5, which would be 7 notes away. And so I'd normally call that, if I went 5, 6, 7 up to here, a perfect fifth. So then I would just have to memorize, well, a perfect fifth could be 7 notes forward, or it could be negative 5 notes. And again, the perfect fifth drops off. You would think the perfect fifth would be 1, 2, 3, 4, the negative fourth scale degree. But we don't have that, right? Now, if we use this term, a modal range, if an IX modal range, a 1,5 modal range, the distance would be a negative, because I'm going from here to here. I can identify the distance, negative 5 node away from the Ionian node, negative third modal half step, which would be a negative fourth scale degree. We don't have a 4 here, right? And that would make sense because I can then see the inverse. I can see the forward distance going clockwise by taking 12 minus 5, which would be 7. And I can see that the 7 minus 3 would be 4. So I'd have a 7 node away Ionian fourth would be the forward distance. This makes symmetrical sense. This, we have to come up with some workaround to use the current tools that we have. All right, so then I'm going to say, all right, and let's do the next one. We go back 6. So this is the weird one because the 6 is right in the middle, whether we go forwards or backwards. So if I go back 6, notice I can't go back 6 from anything normally that will fit in it, except I believe the Locrian. So if I was on the crazy Locrian and I go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're good. So I'm going to go from here to back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back to here. Okay, let's look at it there. So what would that be then? Well, I have to say going forward, it would also be 6, because 12 minus 6 is 6. And we usually call that a diminished fifth, right? A 6 note away diminished fifth, but it could be an augmented fourth sometimes. That's going to be the crazy weird one. So all right, so that's going to be that one. And so I would just remember then, though, that I can go negative diminished fifth or flat 5, a negative flat 5. Right, and again, you would think it would be in the negative direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, negative fourth scale degree, but we don't use scale degrees, so you ended up having to say, oh, I'm just going to call it a flat 5, I guess, but it's going to be a negative 6 flat 5. If I went 6 forward, it would be 5, 6 right there, going this direction. All right, so let's go to the next one. So this was negative 6. Let's go up to the next one, and we're going to say, all right, what if we go negative 7 backwards?